Hello, I'm Sylvia Hughes, the recently elected Mayor of Raunds, and proud to be so. As Mayor, I am concerned to engage our community in conversations about issues which are important for the residents of Raunds. As we all know, our focus as a community and individuals is on coping with COVID. And one of the issues at the top of our list of worries at this time is getting our children back to school as soon and as safely as possible. My conversation today is with Matt Coleman and Lee Towers. Matt is Director of Primary Education for the Nene Education Trust, which includes Manor School, St Peter's, Windmill, Stanwick, Park Infants, Woodford and Newton Road, Rushden. Lee is a Vice Principal of Manor School. As Mayor, I am sure we are all concerned about what is going to happen to our schools. And so over to you, Matt, to tell us the plan.
Thank you, Sylvia. And congratulations on becoming Mayor, by the way. This was really good news. You made the point that sort of in your introduction around that the aim is for us to get children back to school as safely and as soon as possible. And that is the key thing that we're working on all the time. And when schools closed on the 20th of March, when we closed our doors to our children, we didn't know how long that would be for. This is a massively unknown time for all of us. And as school leaders and as teachers and as everyone working within a school environment, what we want most of all is for our young people to be in school, learning, socialising, growing together, and all of the great things that we offer. So for a lot of us, for all of us, this is a really, really hard situation. It's really important to remember from the outset that this is a health and safety crisis. It's about health, it's about well-being, it's a medical thing. Our hands are tied with this. There's very little we can do. We receive guidance as school leaders regularly. In fact, since the middle of May, we've received over 40 different guidance documents from central government, where often the expectations change, the goalposts shift a little bit because it's a very fluid situation. So we've had to be very reactive. In the last 10 and a half weeks of us working within this organisation, with all 7 schools within the trust, it's been very reactive. We've had to communicate regularly with staff, with parents and carers, and with children. And I'm really delighted to say that in many cases, actually, the link between school and home seems to have really improved. There's been some great regular communication between teachers and the children and students in their classes. And it is quite heartening to know that as a community, despite the distancing measures and the lockdown that we've been under, actually that we're still a very close-knit, tight community. In terms of the schools themselves, strategically, the overview is to, as I said, to get children back into schools as safely and as soon as possible. But practically, that isn't possible. And we'll talk to Lee Towers in a moment, who is the Vice Principal of Manor School, and he'll talk to us about sort of the operational and logistical difficulties that we've been faced with over the past few weeks. We are opening our doors to the key worker and vulnerable children at the moment, and that's how it has been for the past 10 and a half weeks. From next week, we have those provisions going back to the home schools. So currently it's only been at Windmill Primary School and at Newton Road School in Rushden. And from the week after, from the 15th, we will begin to reintroduce in our sort of our plan to wider open our schools. We'll begin to reintroduce the specified year groups as detailed by central government. However, the thing to note on that is that some schools won't be able to take certain year groups. Some schools may not be able to take all of the children that are expected to return as determined by the government, simply down to space and operational logistics within the school. we are having to function with social bubbles and small groups of children, obviously spaced out contact. There are only a certain number of people we can have in an environment at any one time. So again, operationally and strategically, with the strategic overview, it has been quite a feat. Not something that personally I've expected to experience in my teaching career, and I'm sure it's the same for all of the other adults who work within our schools. What I can say is that we are all absolutely focused on making sure that every step of the way, health, safety and well-being, both physical and mental well-being, are at the forefront of what we do. And we absolutely cannot wait for our schools to return to some sort of normality, whatever that might be. But I fear that's a long way off yet. And we do need to be mindful of that, and sort of supportive of the fact that everybody within our organisation is doing everything we possibly can to ensure, like I said, safety, well-being of all of our people, children, staff, parents, carers, community, and we just need to be aware that this is going to take time. So patience and understanding is sort of the order of the day, please. Lee, do you want to tell us a little bit about you're at Windmill and have been at Windmill for, it seems like most of the last few weeks, haven't you? Boss man over there. So if you can just give us a bit of a flavour of what's been going on and perhaps how it's changed and adapted as the time's gone on as well.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that this is now the 11th week of the key worker provision. So provision for children whose parents are key workers, and also those that are perhaps considered vulnerable as well. And whilst, as Matt suggested, the guidance has been shifting and there's been numerous updates on the guidance, we've had to respond to that in the key worker provision. And so I think the one reassuring point for parents is that colleagues within the trust, in particular, in the experience that we've had here, have become very, very adaptable and very, very responsive. And we've had to be extremely resilient in order to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything that we can to make sure that the children, the staff, and everybody within the community is safe. And so myself as a parent whose children come to Windmill, I think that is reassuring to know that to some extent the circumstances have really upskilled staff in order to respond and to shift the organisational way of life quite dramatically. I think in terms of the children, we've seen firsthand over the last 10, 11 weeks how resilient they can be as well, because as Matt said, they're coming back to a context that's completely different. It is. There's no way around that. It will cause some anxiety for parents about whether they send their children back or not, because it is very, very different. And we've got children here from reception all the way through to year 9, and they're all anxious in their own different ways. We've had to move. So for them, 1 week has been very different to the next week as we've updated our systems and processes to respond to the guidance. But they are very resilient and they are adaptable in the same way that staff have had to be responsive. Organisationally, it's been a lot of work to ensure that systems and processes reflect the current climate and the current context. So systems and processes around first aid, around entrance to the building, around classroom organisation, around breaks, around lunch times, around eating, around what we call unstructured time, which would be the opportunity for socialisation, for want of a better phrase, how the students interact with each other. And we've had to manage all of those things and do it very, very quickly here. It's a challenge for principals and school leaders to prepare for 1st of June, 8th of June, 15th of June, whatever their own timelines are. But it's been equally challenging here to make sure that we respond really, really quickly. But what I would say is I think we are able to meet the demands of the guidelines within the provision as best as we possibly can. But as Matt said, the challenge for school leaders moving forward is, how do you then also start to reintegrate larger numbers of pupils back into a school where you've already got a key worker provision that's taking up, I would say, a significant and an increasing number of spaces, because we've got teachers returning to work, which for us as a trust, there are a relatively large number of parents and carers who work in our trust. And so that's increased the numbers within the provision.
Okay. Gosh, it's so you've had to entirely rethink school, the life of the children, how to maintain their learning at the same time as keeping them safe.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very fortunate in the sense that you know, the philosophy is that obviously the key worker provision is part of the wider trust. So we've been able to draw on all of the senior leaders and leadership teams and colleagues within the trust to really help and support what's happening here. There's colleagues from all of the schools within this provision, and so this experience is invaluable, I think, when it comes to preparing for reopening. So, but absolutely, lots of organisational change has had to happen, even just from the way that people come in and come out and exit the building, or don't come in at all.
Yeah.
And as we speak, Sylvia, we've got the 5 schools where students and young people haven't been in. So the 5 schools that have essentially been closed since the end of March, they are now being prepared and readied for when children can return. So those environments are going to look and feel very different for our young people and our community. And ultimately, the big point to make here is that schools are rubbish places when there's no children in them. They really are. There's nothing there. They're just empty buildings at the moment. And the schools that children are going back to, as much as they will be the same building, they're going to be very different operationally. It'll be interesting to have a look round with Lee, actually, to see what's happened at Windmill, because even the school there, the provision you've got there, things look and feel very different, don't they, Lee?
Yeah. And we'll have a quick. I'll show you around, and you can have a look at some of the different bits and pieces in a second. I think the one thing I would add is yes, there've been a number of challenges, and I think we've been able to overcome them to the best of our ability and do it effectively as well. I think the biggest challenge is communication, and I think parents and carers out there will be thinking it's the unknown, and the challenge for schools is if I could be as forward as to say, is that the communication that we're getting has been probably one of the greatest challenges in terms of the timings, arguably the lack of it, arguably the lack of clarity in some of the guidelines. And we're really conscious, I think, as an organisation, to make sure that we communicate, and at times, often it's best to over communicate in order to reassure people. But what I would say to parents and carers is that has been the biggest challenge, is that knowing what to communicate has been a really, really hard and continues to be so. Even in the timelines that we've got in place, we're still crossing the T's and dotting the I's now. So as a parent myself, but also as somebody, you know, working in the organisation, I can absolutely understand why parents and carers may be feeling anxious and feeling that is the communication as prompt as it could be. I would say we're doing our very, very best in what is, I would say, the biggest challenge to the organisation at the moment.
Yeah, and I would say that the cohesive teamwork of the trust behind it has allowed you a starting point, which is already making a difference. If you had to build that in order to get here, you really wouldn't be anywhere close to having the confidence that every child is going to be looked after.
Yeah. So, should we have a look around the organisation?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll go over to the entrance point and just show you how we're trying to ensure that we've got both bus systems in place. So you'll have to bear with me as I wander around the school. First and foremost, unless you're a child in the provision, and to some extent if you're dropping off, there'll be no there's no reason for anybody else to be in school, basically. So visitors are by appointment only, and parents and carers collect from outside of the school. And so if I just go down to here, I know it's really quiet and sunny.
And that's an interesting point there, Lee, because I think I said this to you, Sylvia, before. I haven't been into a school for 10 weeks. A lot of my job my role has been working either from the central office or from home. So strategically sort of communicating regularly with and helping to orchestrate what's going on. But I haven't been in. So our mindset from the outset was a minimal staff as possible and sort of initially as few children as possible. And we were very grateful to all of the parents and carers in our community who kept their children at home, whatever challenges that might have posed, work-wise or whatever else. The initial guidance was only come into a school and a provision if you really, really need it. And thankfully, our numbers at the beginning were quite low, weren't they, Lee? And I think people really heeded that message. So we were very grateful for that.
Yeah, and there was definitely a shift from in the early stages before the criteria for what key worker was. The numbers were in the hundreds, but once that came out, it did drop. And I think parents and carers are absolutely understand that this is an essential provision. And I think that message has come across. But equally, as more and more people return to work, there are more people that fall into that key worker list in terms of teachers, in terms of people returning to work. In terms of the entrance, we've obviously got the cone staggered. I don't know if you can see that very well. So obviously it's the point at which they have to stay 2 meters apart. We've got the social distancing signs as well to remind people about around 2 feet. Not 2 feet, sorry, 2 meters. And we've also got blue painted arrows to really make sure that at drop off that it's staggered. Obviously, when schools return, there'll be more children, so the drop-off points are going to be more spread out. But that is really important that we maintain that 2 meter distance when children are being dropped off at school. Equally, when we go into school, there's obviously a process around anybody coming in, around what they have to do. So the signage is all appropriate around symptoms. So the constant reminders. Constant reminders around what the government are defining as symptoms and the expectations around people coming in, 14 days, etc., etc. We have our hand sanitizer station. Even for anybody just coming in to talk to staff, students can use this as well. It's a controlled mechanism, so we can control who comes in and out of the building. And then when we go into the classrooms, we also have we've also got, just have to be quiet because there's obviously some teaching going on, but we've got students socially distanced and they have their own toilets and their own cloakrooms, so that when students go in, they're using the same set of toilets. That's what we call a social bubble. And as far as we possibly can, the students in that bubble stay in that bubble.
How many children were in there, Lee?
So at the moment in that classroom, there's 9. What we obviously have to factor in is the size of the classroom. That's really, really important. And schools that were built in the 70s, in the 80s, don't meet the new guidelines for the size of the classroom. And so you could be looking 10, 15, 20 metres squared smaller than the national guidelines. And that has a massive impact. So when Matt said earlier around you have to take into account space, parents and carers at home will be thinking, well, the school's not shrunk and you've got less children in. Well, yes, but when you factor in all of the guidelines and you factor in the size of the classroom, the reality is you're looking in most schools here at Windmill, and it'll be the same at Manor School. You're looking at a maximum of 10 people in the classroom, if not less than that. And so that's where space becomes a premium, because the reality is you'd be lucky to get double figures in terms of students into the classroom, because the other thing that you need to maintain is a safe working space for teachers. And so taping off a square or a box that students aren't allowed into, that the teacher can stand in, providing that comfort, reassurance and safety measure for the members of staff, because we have to remember this, is that members of staff will be coming back to work
and they'll be feeling nervous and they'll be feeling anxious. They've been working extremely hard from home, and that can't be overstated how hard they're working. But again, it's going to be a different way of working for them. So at the minute, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bubbles here at the windmill provision. But looking at the numbers of parents that we spoke to this week, we are seeing a real spike in that. So I think off the top of my head, we were looking at the number of students across the trust requiring a place was around 115 to 125-ish. Some of those are still waiting to confirm working patterns and things like that, because schools are trying to accommodate doing staff rotas and things like that.
Do we encourage outdoor learning as much as possible?
Yeah, so we are fortunate here at Windmill in terms of the key work provision, and probably the reason why the decision was made is because there were a number of playgrounds, and so in unstructured time, which is break and lunchtime, students can go outside. We know the risk is lower when they're outside, but what we have to do is we have to stagger break times, because we can't have 50 to 60 students all out in the same playground. We have to show due diligence, and that's the right thing to do. So we have 3 playgrounds and we have a field space. And so with the 5 bubbles, we can easily create times where there's only one social bubble out here at a time. And equally, the space is really, there's a lot of space. So where we possibly can, we'll say the lessons can take place outside. Because we've got this playground here. We've got a larger, Windmill have a larger one at the back, and then another one round the side. So we can keep reception year 1, and then year 2 and 3, year 4 to 6, and then the Key Stage 3 students completely separate. We've got 2 bubbles in Key Stage 3, and they don't interact either. So.
And I now have a much clearer picture as to what the day-to-day life is going to be for children, and I'm fascinated to know. I imagine the children are very flexible and they can easily learn a new approach and easily quite adaptable, aren't they?
I mean, children are adaptable. They're very resilient. They often cope better with change than we do as adults, actually. And I think the key thing that Lee and team at Windmill, but also other school leaders as our schools open more widely over the next few weeks. The key thing will be clarity of explanation, clear boundaries for children, so they understand why they can do a certain thing or they can't do something. I think I from a very personal situation, I dropped my children at school this morning for the first time in over 10 weeks. I've got a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I know that both of them were anxious in the days leading up to it. But what I made sure was I just regularly communicated with the children, with my children, as to what it would be like, and almost just walk through the day. So this is what will happen on the lead up to the school, to the door. There will be spaced out areas where sort of you have to keep your distance. You will be in a bubble with a group of children, and that's who you will be with for the whole day or the whole week. And that's who you'll have your lunch with. That's who you'll have your unstructured times with. That's who you will do your learning with, etc. So I think the key thing for the key preparation for our young people who are incredibly resilient is in that communication beforehand, just helping them to be aware. And as Lee talked earlier about the number of children that have joined the provision at Windmill today, and about sort of the induction process that those children will go through. It's almost a familiarisation with this is the new normal for the time being, and this is what's expected of you. This is how we will keep you safe. This is how you will keep yourself safe. And it's boundaries of steel, isn't it, Lee? It's just being really clear around you use the word due diligence. But it's those clear guidelines, clear boundaries. And while we're in this position for however long this is going to last, and I can see it being months, if not longer, this is what our normal is for the time being.
I think for me, what I think parents who will be watching this can take away is that they'll be able to have those conversations now with their children because they've heard it from you, they've seen it through Lee's little walkabout. So they will, instead of dropping the children off at the school thinking, well, I can't help you, I don't know, you'll just have to do as you're told or follow the... Actually, I think this will give them some reassurance that they can feel, they can reassure their children as they go through the gates. I don't know whether you agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, experiencing it on that first day will be the biggest benefit in terms of helping students to sort of settle and to know what to expect. I think the other thing that is worth noting is that we are welcoming children and young people back who may have experienced challenges of their own. We know people within the community that have had their own experiences with the epidemic, with the disease, and we, as well as organisational logistics, as well as systems and processes, as well as communicating and reintegrating students back in, we have to be aware of those people who have experienced real difficulties, and because that is going to add to the anxiety about how they feel coming back in, and communication is critical in that. And we have to know, we need to know, and then we can prepare for that. I think that's really, really important. Mental health is often a phrase that's talked about a lot. I think in this context, it's what are we actually going to do to help support the people when they come back in. And I know the principals and the school leaders across the trust are preparing for this. Matt might talk a little bit more about centrally around sort of mental health first aid and things like that to reassure parents around and carers what we're doing to support children and young people.
So I think, thanks, Liam. I think in a very basic sense, the main focus for children as they return to school as it is at the moment, for the next few weeks, the main focus of their curriculum learning will be on that well-being, mental health aspects, almost trying to unpick and understand what this sort of whole traumatic experience has been about. So as Lee said, that support, that guidance, that nurturing aspects that we're also very good at anyway, will be even more focused on. That's not to say that the academic side of learning is just going to be sort of pushed to one side, but a much greater balance will be had, I think. And that's for our young people, it's for our children, but it's also for people within the community and for our staff as well. Lee mentioned the staff earlier and their own anxieties, and I think we need to be particularly mindful as an organisation of looking out and looking after, what we always do anyway, but it's just highlighted even more at the moment, just looking out for each other. So Lee mentioned mental health first aiders, so every school has assigned mental health first aiders, and we've been meeting regularly as a group, virtually, obviously, to discuss approaches and sort of the ways in which we're going to support any wellbeing challenges that we're faced with. And I think the other thing is that we cannot underestimate the long-lasting impact that this could have.
I think the message I think I would give to the children and young people is that we feel the same anxieties that you do, and that we absolutely understand the difficulties in terms of transitioning back into school. But what I will say is be reassured that staff, school leaders are working really, really hard to make sure everything is safe, as far as it possibly can be, that it's safe for you to come back in, but listen to what the teachers are saying, follow the guidelines that are in place, and hopefully we can start to, in time, ease more and more children back in. But it will take time.
The message to parents and carers is very similar to what Lee just said for our young people, actually. I think the key point is that as an organisation, we make every decision with the mindset and the approach that kind of, would it be right for my own child or my own niece or nephew? And I've certainly, as this whole process has gone on, been driven by that, and I know Lee would have been the same, and Chris, our CEO, Jay, the secondary principal, etc. All of the views of all of our leaders is, would it be right for our own children? So to echo Lee, we're doing, we have done all that we possibly can and more. Our whole focus and our whole priority is on making sure that our children and young people feel safe, cared for, looked after, nurtured. Their well-being is of paramount importance to us. This is a health crisis that we never anticipated, and nobody could have prepared us for this. But in terms of when schools do reopen, it will have, or when the wider opening happens, it's done. It's been planned for and done with the very best of guidance, the very best of intentions. And I absolutely look at all of our schools and think there's no areas that we actually haven't covered off. As a trust, we've totally got this. And as parents and carers, you can believe and trust in what we've got coming out for our young people.
And if I could be as forward as to add to that, Matt, I think communication's important to us, and we have communicated. We absolutely will continue to keep communicating with you in the next 7 to 14 days. So be reassured that it is our priority to make sure we communicate and continue to communicate those messages that you need to hear. And so watch this space. We'll continue to be in touch with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and good luck in the next few days. And we'll look forward to catching up a little bit further down the line. Perhaps next time we'll talk to the children.
That'd be great.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Matt and Lee for giving us a valuable insight into the challenging future for education. I know that delivering organisational change of this magnitude is impossible without clearly defined goals. The very nature of the COVID-19 outbreak means there cannot be clearly defined objectives. So in this case, the success rests with the Nene Education Trust team. I take away from this conversation that our children are in capable, caring hands. The team have been responsive to constantly changing government guidelines. They have been organised and focused in their pursuit of the best solution for each school individually, the children, the parents, and the staff. Central to the Trust's plans has been the communication with parents as the government's guidance has evolved. I think we can be assured of their unfailing commitment as we move forward with caution into a new world of education. Thank you.